The amphitheater was saturated in a dull roar as the assembled crowd of zealots and acolytes waited for their master's sermon. Hundreds of species of the galaxy's denizens waited impatiently for the arrival with mandibles clicking, pedipalps tapping on the floor and suction cups impatiently popping in anticipation. The distinct black and yellow striped robes of the church and peculiar patterns on the flooring made an almost heavenly, mesmerizing pattern. Antennae twitched and flicked as the crowd's noise of impatience reached a fever pitch. The master of ceremonies finally arrived, an alien allegory for the Pope, wearing a strange wedge-shaped hat. His robes were longer, more resplendent compared to his fellows. Smaller aliens similar to cockroaches scuttled along the ground behind him, keeping the robe off the floor. He approached his central podium and banged a strange gavel. I simply sat there in my seat on the front row. Calm, collected, smug, I was about to single-handedly create a full-scale galactic-sized civil war among the galaxy's most dangerous cult. I had a little gifty for them, and a few friends helped me arrange it. It took a huge amount of preparation and will hopefully be worth it, and all I needed was some small samples. Children, we stand united as one in the name of the sacred substance. Stand, my fellows, for the sacred journey must be made on our own feet. The master spoke loudly, his voice reverberating through the building at an annoyingly loud volume. The entire stadium, 20,000 of them, stood up, the sound of hard chitin and hoof hitting the floor all at once sounding similar to a volley of artillery. I had to cover my ears a bit and tried to wipe the smile off my face. Every alien reached into their robe into a specially made refrigerated pouch and pulled a slice of cheese out. Simple slice of sandwich-grade cheddar. "Cheese is life!" the master loudly screamed. "Cheese is life!" The stadium erupted in turn. They all put the slice of cheese on their heads. "The cheese is within us!" The master spoke again. "Cheese!" The aliens all spoke in turn, almost breaking my ears and making me deaf. Almost. They all sat down, then ate their slice of cheese. I shook my head and had a moment to calm down. Once the cheese pope was done, he banged his cheese wedge-shaped gavel and calmed everyone down. "My children, we have this day a most auspicious guest, the creator of today's cheese harvest, the CEO of Mars Dairy Incorporated, Mr. James Franco da Silva." He spoke loudly and gestured to me. The stadium erupted into a deafening cheer. I raised my hands in a gesture of thanks and smiled. I just wanted this over with. Faster. I waited a solid 5 minutes before the whistling and clapping finally died down. The cheese pope stood off his podium and gestured for me to take his place for a speech. The aliens all gathered chanted, "Speech, speech, speech," as I moved and stood. I held my hands up politely, asking for silence. "Hello, friends. Thank you for inviting me to this momentous occasion. I have a gift for you. Look under your seats. There is a little box for each of you." "Yes, it does contain cheese," I said with a chuckle, receiving a hearty cheer from the crowd. Within seconds, every alien had in their hands /paws/cups/hooves a small red present box with a neat little bow. I looked up at the gigantic holoscreen and saw that an entire Marine Corps regiment was outside handing similar boxes out to the some 300,000 aliens outside who couldn't fit in the stadium. I personally handed one such small lunchbox-sized present to the cheese pope. "Before you open the gift, I have a secret to tell you." The crowd unanimously awed at my statement. These aliens were so goddamn receptive to even the smallest thing. I chuckled a bit before resuming. "The cheese you have so focused yourselves on is not the only type of cheese in the world," I said with a smirk. I received a mixture of charges of blasphemy and wonder, of celebration and hatred from the assembled crowd. I raised my hands, gesturing for silence. Yes, I know. I figured you would say that. However, the Terran Republic is not as friendly as I am. I am, in fact, along with other companies, been getting threats, messages, and taxation demands to reduce production because of all of you. The government is threatening to shut my company down if the situation gets worse. Which means... I leaned forward and whispered into the mic. "The cheese will stop. No more cheese. Ever." The stadium and surrounding countryside erupted in a deafening roar of anger and sadness. I gave them a few minutes to just weep and cry before I continued. I raised my hands, calling for silence. It was granted. However, this is because of market saturation, not politics. Creating so much standard cheddar is basically breaking our economy. And yours, too. We need diversification of products in order to stabilize the food market. A lot of other nations are on our necks, too. It's not good. So, in order to do this, I have some good news, and some bad news, I said. The crowd assembled leaned in and listened so carefully as if I was about to tell them a secret to the universe or something. I continued. You may now open your presents, I said. The crowd opened up their box to reveal 8 different flavors and variants of cheese, all in neat little cubes wrapped in rice paper just to keep them fresh. Fact: there are more than 2,000 different variations of cheese currently produced by the Terran Federation, and that's just on Earth. I'm not counting the colonies, I said. A loud, shocked gasp of awe and horror erupted from the crowd, the world itself nearly echoing with the noise. Fact: that's just the cheese itself. Each and every cheese has hundreds of different ways to prepare, cook, and eat the cheese too, and each way to prepare it changes its flavor and aroma, I said. A loud, long ooh escaped the crowd. They looked at their little gift with curiosity and questions. At this point, even the cheese pope was taking interest, using one of his mandibles to inspect a cheese cube. What you have in that little box is a sample of the 8 most popular cheeses currently available on Earth. Parmesan, provolone, Americano cheese, brie, Gouda, feta, and camembert. And of course, a slightly more mature variant of everyone's favorite, cheddar, I explained, using a box of my own to point out each cheese as I called it. The aliens were now very interested, sniffing, nibbling, testing, and poking the cubes as I finished. It was working, so I continued. It is time for the cheese tasting. I hereby relinquish my seat and hand it over to conduct proper ceremonies. I left the podium, gesturing for the cheese pope to take my place. I looked up at the huge hollow screen, noticing how my Marines had positioned themselves near families or children. I called the comms, and all stations were ready. This was gonna be messy. The cheese pope began the ceremony known as the cheesening, and held 1 cube of cheese up to the crowd. "The cheese is within us!" he yelled out and ate the cube of camembert. His mandibles clicked and chirped with delight, rolling the cheese in his mouth. "Oh, oh," he chirped happily as he nibbled. The others in the crowd started nibbling at their own cubes of cheese. I, however, carefully, hastily, and as nonchalantly as I could, quick-walked my way out of the stadium and towards the command bunker. I paid close attention to my personal holodata assistant and was now nervous. This was it. Either a full-scale riot or a peaceful cheese party. One way or another, this was gonna hurt. I entered the bunker in a rush and ordered the soldiers behind me to seal the door, moving towards the other delegates. Ambassadors from each of the council nations each had their own control panel and were desperately trying to keep up with the news feed, their own troops stationed on the city outskirts. I checked comms. There weren't just the crowds in the streets by the stadium. There was a full fleet in space. 2 million tons of each kind of cheese, all flown in under military guard to this one planet, with nearly 25 million boxes of cubed cheese bits, all under guard from the galaxy's first ever full military combine. 23 separate nations all contributed together for the first time in galactic history, totaling nearly 200,000 ground troops, 300,000 sailors, and 40,000 warships. We were ready for blood. I walked up to a human, the army general in control of the operation, and saluted him. "Ops clear, stations ready, now we wait, sir." "Good work, Lieutenant. Let's hope it doesn't come to that," he replied, resuming his chat with a Gartharian war boss. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" I asked again. "Granted," he replied without turning away. "Is there really going to be a fight here? Over cheese? Like, seriously?" I asked. All of the officers assembled spoke at once in response to my question. "Yes." I hanged my head in shame and headed for my post, so I could watch the feed from inside the bunker. As I sat down on my seat in front of the console, a minotaur-like Taurian next to me handed me a pulse rifle and some charge cells. We shared a nod and resumed work. It didn't take long. The alien cultists all ate the cheese. The cheese pope made an offhand comment about how he preferred brie above camembert. 2 cultists in the crowd began to argue over which was better, their cheddar or the mature cheddar. Then more started arguing, then more, then Wakak Hag, a Taurian and Chikhak, an Olivarchian came to fisticuffs. It all went straight to hell after that. The halls were sterile and clean. White walls and a grey-tiled floor flew past them as the crew marched towards their destination. A Terran Marine escorting a clutch of children from the Tumino race, a species described by humans as a race of soft-shelled turtles. A clutch of 5, barely toddlers by human standards, were all haphazardly clinging to the human soldier as he walked to where their parents were held. They passed several cells, making the tiny turtlings shiver. Shuddering former cultists and cheese fanatics, refugees from damaged ships or criminals from the Great Cheese Riot. They stopped in front of cell 34A, Block 3. Inside, a female Tumino and her mate, sitting somber and sad as they read a book together, brooding over the 5 empty cribs in the cell. "Mr. and Mrs. Garak, you have visitors," the Marine said as he opened the cell door. The squelch of tiny flipper feet hitting the floor alerted both of the rhinoceros-sized creatures, and tears were shed, cries were had, and hugs aplenty followed. The cell block echoed in a squeal of delight as the family was reunited. A Tumino nurse waddled behind the Marine and stepped into the cell with the family. The Marine closed the cell behind them and let them chat as he stood guard. The Marine sighed as he recalled how the family got here. The cheese riot started, and everyone went crazy as the cheese cult effectively had a short but brutal civil war. No deaths, thank God, but a lot of very close calls. Families separated due to safety concerns, overdoses from aliens eating too much of a specific cheese, or injuries from fighting each other or police and military. The Marine stepped back into the cell door to let a Taurian pass. The Taurian was a Marine like him, and was dragging behind him a Kasarnis, a jellyfish-like species wearing a straitjacket. The two soldiers shared a nod and resumed their post. A few minutes later, the nurse spoke up. "Oh, Mr. Martinez, I'm ready to leave now," the nurse said, her speech slow but delightful to hear. "Right," he said and opened the cell door. She hurriedly left and watched with a smile as the cell was closed behind her. "Such a delightful couple, aren't they?" "Yeah. What's the diagnosis, Dr. Rakthan?" Martinez asked. "Oh, please, call me Raki. Everyone does. As for the diagnosis, full rehabilitation complete, time served. The detox is done. They have been properly educated on what cheeses they can or cannot consume, so now we shouldn't have this again. They are free to leave as far as I'm concerned, medically and mentally at least, but that's not up to me. Come now, I shall file my report," she said in turn with a big happy smile. "Good to hear. So, any, thoughts on this situation?" Martinez asked as they walked to the offices. "Yes, it's quite strange. The cheese cult is still very active, although the new Grand Chamberlain has put some very new and very strict rules in place for further consumption. It genuinely terrifies me as to how badly this new narcotic has saturated the market," she said as they walked away, passing a few dozen cells. "New narcotic? Don't tell me the cheese cult is doing other things now," Martinez said with a sad tone. No, cheese boy, cheese. That narcotic of yours is awful. It's a bad drug. I have no idea how it is legal to sell it on the open market," Nurse Raki said with a serious tone. "What the Martinez tried to say. "Don't give me that. Language. We need to regulate this substance, see. It is so very bad. It does this to us, I can only imagine what it does to humans. Gods, so bad," she said as she waddled into her office. Holy, Raki, did you pass your intraspecies medical certification?" Martinez spoke up. "No, I haven't passed it yet. I'm still waiting on authorization, but all this nonsense is keeping everyone too busy," she replied as she sat in her seat. "Oh, Jesus Christ, yeah. Cheese isn't a narcotic for humans. It's a staple food source and a critical component in a lot of extremely popular foods. It doesn't do much to us. You don't know what narcotics are. Real narcotics by our standards. You don't want to know," Martinez said and left the room, leaving Nurse Raki in a state of shock. Martinez stood outside her office for a minute, collecting himself and wondering just how bad this situation would get. If this was what happened to aliens based just on cheese, he had a moment of introspection. If this is what cheese does, God help us when they find chocolate, he said to himself and started to walk to his post. Nurse Raki quietly opened the door and peered into the hallway. "Wait, what's chocolate?" Martinez stopped in his tracks. "Oh, shit."